Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation for May 2011. We're in the Cone Room tonight because we changed our meeting date. Normally we hold meetings on Monday, but in an effort to increase the likelihood of the tax bills going out before other municipalities and getting ahead of the curve on the printing of them, we're holding our meeting tonight or as soon as practicable after the RTM meeting of the budget. So, ED4 now comes before us. Non-routine item. For that, I'll call on Chairman of our Budget Committee, Mike Mason.
Good evening, everyone. ED4, Board of Education, an additional appropriation, site work and playground equipment, $87,289. I so move that item.
It's been moved by Mr. Mason, second by Mr. Simon. Discussion.
This appropriation comes from a capital improvement project at North Miami School, where it was last summer they were doing the parking lot rehabilitation, expanding the parking area, removing rock. During the process of the project, they ran into some increased rock issues, some underground problems. What happened is there was requests for change orders, and quite frankly, the change orders increased the cash need on the project, and the Board of Education found themselves expending out of their operating budget to cover this. We all know it's the town. We're very serious on not committing funds towards something there's no appropriation for. So as this went along, I guess it got to a point where our committee looked at it as we have no choice in this matter. We don't get to do anything, lessons learned. Can we bid anything differently? It was just the commitments were made. There was police overtime in this, what we call blue payroll. Ben from the Board of Ed came to our meeting. We met with him, and quite frankly, our vote was 4-0 with little choice in the matter. And we really ask all the appointing authorities, in this case the Board of Ed, it's very important. You cannot make a commitment on behalf of the municipality that you don't have an appropriation for. And our vote was 4-0 in favor.
Further discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. I believe we're 11-0-0. Again, tonight, Ms. Barton, my understanding is will be rejoining us hopefully around the September timeframe. So we wish her all the best in her return and during her absence.
Mr. Chairman, is your mic on?
My mic, I believe, is on. There we go. Okay. Item 3 now comes before us, consideration of routine applications. For that, I'll call on our clerk, Joe Pellegrino.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move 2 routine applications tonight. The first is HD4, Health Department. This is a request to approve to use $75,500. It is a request to move from the Public Health Readiness H1N1 grant to various accounts, professional services, medical supplies, surgical apps. This is to amend an existing contract regarding health emergency preparedness contract. The second one is PR2, Parks and Recreation. This is a request to transfer $71,000 from regular salaries to temporary salaries to cover unbudgeted cost for the Ranger Program, Greenwich Police Department support, and lifeguard and boat crew accounts.
It's been moved by Mr. Pellegrino.
Second.
Second by Mr. Simon. A discussion? Mr. Mason.
If I may, these items did come before the Budget Committee this week, and they were approved. Both items were approved 4-0, and we thank the departments for their very detailed applications on this.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? 11-0-0. Item 4 now comes before us, the assessor's report. Tonight, our assessor, Ed Courtney, and assistant assessor, Bob Shipman.
Good evening, board members. And Mr. Chairman. I'll make a few comments about my report and then be prepared to answer any questions. The main item is that the Board of Assessment Appeals completed their hearings in April, and they sent out notices to all the people who had appeared for a hearing on May 2nd. In total, there were 540 appellants. That was about 46% less than there was during the 2005 revaluation. And decisions that were made were 283, and that is about a 50% reduction in the number of decisions making reductions from the 2005. The amount of the reductions total were $104,260,880. The total impact on the total values on the grand list is about 0.34 of 1%, about a third of 1%. On the court cases litigation, we're now down to having only 9 cases outstanding. There was one reduction made of a brand-new house that's under construction, reducing it from $6.641 million down to $5,810,000. The senior tax program is underway. Tomorrow is the last day that applicants can file, new applicants and those that need to file. So it is important that they come into our office tomorrow, or at least mail in the application if they're not able to get in, so that it's postmarked tomorrow. In terms of the numbers, we're on par with the number that we had last year at this time. No one has applied for the deferral application, and there are 41 new applicants. On Monday, we're going to start producing the transfer of our grand list to the tax collector, and we've promised that by the end of next week he'll have it in his hands so that he'll be able to produce the tax bills. I've attached a listing of the recent sales activity, and it's showing that values may be stabilizing. I meet monthly with our revaluation liaison committee, and we discuss a number of items. One item this last month we talked about was evaluating the timing and issues for the next revaluation, and they've been monitoring the results of this revaluation. That's my report. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Bill, I'm sorry, Mr. Finger.
Right. Ted, number 4 on your report, firefighter tax credits.
Yes.
I note that you say that, you write here that the volunteer firefighter coordinator is going to provide you later this week with requested information. Can you tell us what consists of the requested information that you're expecting to receive?
Well, under the town ordinance, the fire chief has to certify those members that are eligible to receive the benefit, and the benefit is a $1,000 credit for the firefighters. If they do not own real property, it can go against the automobiles that they may own.
And I believe also that he has to certify that they have met whatever the requirements are, X number of calls, things of that sort. Is that correct? And that they live here, their primary residence is in Greenwich?
Yeah. They have to own a house in order to claim an exemption on the home and have to be there living in it. Their major role is to certify who gets the credit, and then we apply the credit to those that they've certified.
I think one way we can address this point is why doesn't the budget committee simply ask the volunteer coordinator come in with the expectation that he's reviewed those credits and that he has we have a better understanding of what his understanding of these credits are.
Then we could do this next month, but the bills will have gone out by then.
I mean, as you know, it's a process that we know we've addressed the issue with the budget in the budget deliberations, and I think it's an ongoing discussion.
And everything else.
I don't know how the assessor then becomes the arbiter of.
There was one person who they said gets a credit for the $1,000 when he didn't own the property.
Well, I think those are easy ones. I mean, those are more of an assessor's duty to just at least.
Right, so now if the person owns, so we gave this person in the past erroneous credits. So the question is, do we not, and now let's assume he's eligible for a correct credit, do we then try to recoup that, or we just ignore the past errors?
I think we should at least get a report and understand it before we start making
Okay,
ad hoc decisions on individual cases. I think we should have it laid out, talk to the volunteer coordinator next month, and figure out what is the scope of the issue, and then address it that way.
all right, the person may not have any credits this year, and it may not be an issue.
Right. So the budget committee will take it up next month. If the comptroller can make sure that the volunteer coordinator is well aware of what the expectation is for that discussion at the budget committee meeting in June.
If I may just add something, I believe we have a subject to release on the medical side, the medical coverage, so we probably can roll everything in, because there's going to be a subject to release on that also for next fiscal year.
I think that ties into some of the work that's coming out of the audit committee, and I don't believe the report will be ready in June.
Well, whatever, I mean, some, these certifications are coming in from what the assessor said, so maybe we can't tie it together, but at the end of the day, I think there should be a discussion sooner rather than later as to what the process is, where's the oversight, what has the oversight been this year, what has it been in years past, and let's start getting on the same page in terms of who's appropriately getting the credits, and if there are issues with past credits, we need to address them.
Mr. Chairman,
Hold on, Mr. Kelly.
do we know what the underlying ordinance says and requires to be certified? And when they send the letter in, are they saying that they meet all the criteria of the underlying ordinance? I mean, that to me is the touchstone for this. I mean, we can deal otherwise with the medical and stuff like that, but for
Right.
this one, the question is, are they certifying that all of the requirements of the ordinance are being met? And that's, I don't want to just, I don't want a statement that they're volunteer firefighters. I want to know that they're certifying that they've met all the criteria.
I think the comptroller understands what it is that we're looking for now.
Right.
And I think that's a good idea, is to make sure everybody has a copy of the ordinance, make sure that not only the budget committee, but all the other members of the BET have that, and that the volunteer coordinator has reviewed that ordinance in the context of what is expected of him to comment on next month.
Right.
Mr. Norton.
Mr. Chairman, I was simply going to suggest that if we postpone this until the July meeting, I think that the audit will have been completed, and it could be, results of that could be presented to the Budget Committee at its July meeting, which would be prior to the full BET meeting.
Well, I'd rather get a start on this now, and to the extent
Oh,
that
it is being, you know,
the extent that the audit committee's report can supplement what happened in the June meeting, I think we're just all the better for this. This is an issue that has been years in the making, and I think we need to rectify it as sooner rather than later. Mr. Raymer.
Are the credits, though, for the firefighters going to be incorporated in what the tax assessor is going to be passing to the collector?
Yes.
Yes.
So how are you going to handle that if you're going to incorporate the credits and then you're going to acquire afterward, and you're going to be charging these people back if they received erroneous credits?
We're going to have to address it, but the tax bills have to go out, and like I said, this has been an issue years in the making, and I don't think it's solved overnight. And so, unfortunately, yes, there might be situations. I still suspect that the vast majority will have received the credits properly, and there will be proper certification. To the extent that there's an issue issue, we'll have to address it and figure out on an individual basis how we address any erroneous credits that are given.
And it's your feeling, Mr. Chairman, that it's not feasible to do the opposite, and that is to exclude these credits from the bills, and then later on, as they're justified, allow the credits to be handled at the tax collector's office?
Ted? Is what Mr. Raymer suggested feasible?
I think if we're talking about one or two people, I would rather give out the credits and then seek back those credits that were misgiven.
It's a reasonable statement.
Here's the issue is I don't think we really know. I mean, you hope to think that the vast majority of them have been validated and should be going forward. I tend to agree with the assessor that you're going to then be denying a credit asking them to pay their taxes and then getting the credit thereafter after having performed the services and given their time and attention. So
I agree with you.
is there any opposite opinion about this? Everyone's comfortable going forward with the credits now, and then to the extent that we need to make adjustments in the future, we'll do that.
I think it wouldn't be right to do anything like this because people have, have 50 people that may be planning on this as part of their,
Okay. So we'll move on from this topic.
I had one.
Oh.
I just wanted to ask, Mr. Chairman, do you expect the assessor to be at this meeting? I know that he has the ordinance because we reviewed it, or we at least discussed it at our last meeting, but it might be constructive if the assessor attended the Budget Committee meeting along with the fire chief coordinator or whatever.
I'll leave that up to the budget chair after he gets the report or the certification and he's had some conversations, but we'll see. Just talk to Mr. Mason and see if he can watch the microphone. Okay. Moving on. Anything else in the assessor's report? Just because he's here now, I'm gonna deviate a little bit from the agenda and ask the revaluation team report, which I thought was an excellent report. If they can comment just on some of the numbers that were presented in case there are questions for the assessor tonight. Ms. Tarkington?
Yes, thank you. The microphone is down further. I'll just follow up a little bit with what Ted said and then proceed with a little other information that was provided. Again, there were over 21,000 parcels, 21,332 parcels that we have here in town, and 546 of these were appealed to the Board of Appeals, and 293 were granted changes, totaling a reduction of 104 million, Ted, of which 35 million, or 34%, were reductions to land parcels. In 70 million, 66% were reduction to the improvements to the buildings. The reduction to the 2010 grand list was 0.34%, so just a third of 1%. The total reduction exceeds that forecasted by approximately $19 million. Of all the properties appealed, 54% were reduced. And since that time, we've focused on the reductions by property types, and also we're continuing to do some follow-up on lessons to be learned from the decisions made by the Board of Appeals. Some other information that the public may be interested in is that the average residential value as of October 2010 revaluation is $1,749,000. And assuming the mill rate that may be approved tonight of 10.11, its owner will pay $12,380 in real estate taxes. The median residential value is the median. Before was the average. The median is $1,036,300, and its owner will pay $7,335 in real estate taxes. So that's some direct information on how the taxpayer is impacted.
The numbers that you referenced that's the assessed value or the market value?
These were, I guess, well, initially we were talking about the values, and we switched when. Is that right? Oh, we didn't.
1.7 is market value.
Right,
and
is the market value, right.
Both are market.
They're both market values. We're talking about market values, and then we talked about but the properties are valued on their assessed value.
So now I have a question.
Well, so then it doesn't necessarily add up, does it? So if the market value of the median is 1,036,300,
Times 70%. Times 10%.
I guess it works out. Okay.
But that seems a very low median residential value.
That might be assessed.
Last year,
I think it's too
thought
low.
it was 1.4.
Sounds very low to me. And
It doesn't accord with average.
Hold on, please.
Yes. However, the property values have declined since last year.
I have another question.
Right, so hold on. So just to be clear, Ted, you agree that these are the market values?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Fair enough. Mr. Simon, and then if there's
So
a
didn't
question.
we say that the senior tax relief program would be 150%, the maximum would be 150% of what number in a revaluation year?
It's the assessments on those properties that sell.
In a revaluation year?
In a revaluation year, it's calculated differently,
And this is a revaluation year,
yes.
and
We're not here, these numbers do not reflect what you're talking about, where those numbers you're talking about reflect the senior tax credits.
Larry, is the question you're asking, the maximum value of a home eligible for this year's senior tax relief is $1,413,000?
right, which is supposed to be 150% of a certain number, which is $900 and some thousand dollars. And I guess the question is, where did that number come from?
It looked at the assessment of every property that had sold during the specified period and added them up and multiplied by 150 and came up with the answer.
I mean, last year, this number was $2.1 million? Or was it 1.7 million? What was the number last year?
The 100% value, the 70% value was less.
But this number, the 1.4 million, is this assessed value or market value?
Which are you referring to now?
It says the maximum value of a home eligible for this year's senior tax relief is $1.4 million. This must be the 70% assessed value.
What paragraph?
Those assessed, Bob? Yeah.
Let me go back to your report. It's
When,
supposed to be 150% of the average.
Ted,
I think
Hold on. Ted,
I
go ahead.
think in looking at the numbers, these are the 100% numbers, and that the assessed values would be 70% of those numbers.
Right, I think what's happening is that, again, the reval reflects a much longer period of sales. The senior tax relief program only reflects those homes that have sold within the past year. And those numbers, the values are continuing to decline. I mean, this is what our chart attached to the report shows. Ted's chart attached to the, and we made a comment that, somewhere we.
That's a pretty steep decline. That's like a 50% decline over 1 year.
I think, Ted, maybe next month you can give us an analysis of this program relating to the maximum value of the home. And I think that way we can get a better handle as to why that, if the number is correct, why it's there relative to last year's.
All right?
Mr. Finger.
when Ms. Tarkington and I met with the assessor last week, you had given us, Ted, I think it was a 1-page or a 2-page analysis of how you arrived at the number. I don't know whether the chair feels it would be helpful if maybe Ted, before next, probably do it tomorrow, is have that information emailed to us.
Do
That's
that.
great. Why don't we do that?
All right.
Because the ordinance was changed to show different calculations.
Okay, further comments on the assessor's report or the revaluation team's report?
Sorry?
Any other comments on either the assessor's report or the revaluation team report?
No, I'm ready to move. Could we accept the assessor's report?
Moved by Ms. Tarkington. Second. Second by Mr. Finger. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? 11-0-0. Item 5 now comes before us, the comptroller's report.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, DET members. First, I'd like to start by having you turn to page 5. Last Friday, the team of Mr. Simon, Mr. Campbell, Gina Williams from the Board of Education, Maureen Cast, and myself interviewed the finalists for the HR study, and we selected the Hay Group to perform the study. They should be on board the month of May, and hopefully they can do it within 12 to 16 weeks. And if the summer doesn't slow us up, we could probably have a report for September or October. The bottom RFP, we met this morning, the group of Mr. Huffman, Mr. Norton, John Crary, Maureen Cass, myself, and Tori Walker. And for those of you who don't know Tori Walker, she's the payroll administrator. We interviewed Diversified, the incumbent, Hartford, and Vanguard, and we chose Diversified Investment Advisors, the incumbent, to proceed with the DB plan administration, the deferred savings on the 401k, the 2 401ks, and the 457. What came out of this long exercise was a couple of improvements on the process. First of all, we're going to form an oversight group, which hasn't been selected yet, but it'll probably be some of the members of the group. By charter, the employee benefits, human resources area is responsible for this. So it might involve Mr. Creary, myself, Maureen Cast, or a couple other people. And the oversight group is probably going to try to approach Diversified, and I know this is one of Mr. Pellegrino's and Mr. Norton's concerns a year ago, is expand the platform, make the investment options wider for the employees. We're going to write an investment policy, and we're going to have to establish a fiduciary, which presently we don't have a true fiduciary oversight for this operation. So we've accomplished picking 2 finalists on 2 of the long-standing RFPs, and I'll open up to any questions on any of the controller's report.
Questions?
If I could just make a comment?
Yep.
Mr. Mason.
Peter, on your, where is it? On page 6, annual budget process. First of all, I'd like to say thank you. And second of all, I don't think you did yourself justice for the meetings that you attended and went out to, and the material that you brought there, and I really appreciate it. I think it works well. I think that night, for instance, that we did the finance committee, I think that was just spectacular, and I really I want to compliment you. I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit for how many nights out and events you did there. Thank you.
You're welcome, and don't forget Roland Geiger,
I never forget Roland.
behind-the-scenes man.
Mr. Pellegrino.
Peter, going back to the RFP for the record keeper, do you have any sense if the process itself has or will save us money by having gone through this process and having come back to the incumbent?
When you say us, you mean the
The
employees?
town of Greenwich and the employees.
Well, the town of Greenwich only pays for the calculator, the estimator, and we've already, the incumbent won it. They've reduced it from the 90,000 to 76.5. I don't know, Mr. Huffman or Mr. Norton, do you think there'd be any further savings on the town side? This is truly the benefit will be the employees.
I also do think that there's potential savings on the town side.
Okay.
Okay. And is there going to be savings to the employees through having gone through this process?
If they could be educated, like Vanguard, who gave the presentation today, was very big on index funds, and they're probably the cheapest of the 5 that we examined. If they're educated to the fact that we can go to index funds and they have lower fees, yes, it's going to save them a lot of money.
Okay. On the miscellaneous paragraph, I saw that we had the proposal from HDG for $55,000, and is that correct that they've now been engaged?
Yes. We had a kickoff meeting. Did I not put that in there? Yeah, May 4th.
May 4th.
And they have been engaged. There's 2 phases. The contract's for $55,000, and they've promised us I can't say they promised us. The goal is to have a presentation to the BET in July. It's contingent upon updated specifications or something to educate them to what the new building's going to look like. If it's not dramatic as far as the changes to them, we should be able to have a presentation in July.
Okay. And my final question or comment, I guess, is under the risk management paragraph on page 1. You stated that the final report from KERMA was presented to the audit committee. I may be mistaken. I thought that we asked them to refine the final report so we
Okay.
had specific dollar amounts in their recommendations to us.
Yes, okay, that's, the revision to the final report has been finalized. I've just got the electronically, and we sent it down to printing because it's colorized versions. And that's accurate, that's inaccurate, that the final report was revised, and they'll be sent out.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Norton.
Yes, I'd like to also reference on page 3, which is the continuation of internal audit. And the special project manager and the finance department personnel have performed winter storage. And the completed audit has been distributed, I believe, to all BET members this evening, other than which was presented to the audit committee. And the 9-page report that's included here has been posted on the town's website under the Parks and Recreation Division. The principal thrust of this indicates that there are 23 unpaid boats, and those people are being taken to a collection agency for the collection of the unpaid fees. The thrust of having this posted on the town website under the Department of Parks and Recreation is because people will go reference the town website before they initiate the process of winter storage, and this indicates that if they don't pay the report and it taking people to collection agency will indicate that the town is serious about collecting winter storage fees.
Thank you.
It's 23, I think.
Any other questions or comments on the comptroller's report? I was going to put this in my report, Peter, but since you touched upon HDG, so when do you think that we will know whether or not this issue of construction information regarding Nathaniel Witherell will either be an impediment or not relative to the timing of the report?
What I can do is I can call Tom Stitt tomorrow and Mary Zellnell and ask them, because there's been a lot of traffic flow out from Ray Augustine to
Right.
them. And I'll ask them if they don't know at this point to get back to us as soon as possible. And I could-
If they don't have the information now, what I'd like from them is when do they expect to be able to tell us either we're in a more of a holding pattern and we've got some real issues, and just so that everybody is aware of it now, just sort of as a precursor, is if in fact HDG comes back and says there is an insufficient amount of information relative to the construction information to be able to do an assessment of Project Renew, then you're talking about a possibility of Nathaniel Witherell coming back for appropriation to perform further drawings, essentially A&E money. And so what we've asked HDG to do is to see if there's enough information to be able to make an informed decision based on what's out there now. So that's the dialogue that's happening now, and that's why I want to understand this better now rather than later. Okay. Is there a motion to accept the comptroller's report? Moved by Mr. Pellegrino, second by Mr. Norton. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions, 11-0-0. Item 6 now comes before us, acceptance of the treasurer's report.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Norton.
Is the OPEB report for the month of April completed yet?
No, if you recall at the last OPEB meeting, the trust meeting, one of the drawbacks was that Kathleen can't have the information this early in the month, and we moved the July meeting to later in the month, so that she doesn't have she can't have the information this early.
Even
in
on
the month.
today, the 12th? Okay, that's the thrust of my question, because I think
We'll send it out electronically,
Yeah.
but this, again, if this meeting had been next week, she could have had the OPEB report.
Yeah, it's only one next Monday, so in 2 days.
Is there any other questions? Mr. Pellegrino?
No, sorry, I wasn't here.
Is there a motion to approve the
So
treasurer's
moved.
report? Moved by Mr. Pellegrino,
Second.
second by Mr. Norton.
Thank you.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, 11-0-0. Items 7, 8, and 9 now come before us. BET Standing Committee reports, BET Liaison reports, BET Special Project Team reports. You should have received a written copy of the revaluation team report. And then there are, if any of you have any questions or comments as to any of the other reports. I know, Mr. Finger.
No, I don't have a question about any of the reports. I just asked the chair how he wants, may I address the policy and procedure reference handbook, or do you want to do that at some other point?
Some other point, and then I'll certainly recognize you if you have further comments or disagree with my comments.
Fair enough.
I do know and I appreciate, I know they're not listed here and they're not necessarily our formal reports, but I want to thank all the BET members who attended the district and the committee RTM meetings. Again, I think that's always helpful that we're there and present at every single meeting. And then it's equally important that we relay the information from those, first of all, from the committee meetings, so that when we go into district meetings, we're fully aware of what issues came before the RTM at their committees. I had the fortune to go up to District 11, and so I must admit they produce a report, and I think its chair produces a report that rivals ours, has every vote, every item that's vote that's taken. It was helpful. I lost my copy this year because I had to give it to a District 1 representative who thought it was good. So I don't know, maybe you should copyright that or something and do it for the whole RTM. But once again, I think it's just part of the process, and obviously if there was an April RTM meeting, we would have attended those as well, and once again, I think that's just part of a better process. Notwithstanding that, obviously, there are still issues regarding sort of last-minute changes, but I hope that from our end, we're just continuing the dialogue and alleviating some of those issues. Mr. Norton, on some of these project team reports?
I'm not on a project team report, but I just wanted to make an announcement that the audit committee has scheduled a workshop with our external auditor, outside auditor, Vanessa Rosito, for a workshop on the CAFRA, and that's scheduled for June 8th, Wednesday, June 8th, in the Gisborne Room at 8 a.m. And it's open to all BET members as well as the public if they want to come and understand, have a better understanding of how the CAFRA is constructed and what the CAFRA represents.
Okay, that's an official, though, meeting of the audit committee.
It's a special meeting of the audit committee because the regular meeting of the audit committee is the next morning.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Further discussion on any reports? Okay, item 10 now comes before us, the chairman's report. As the comptroller indicated, you should have read in my message, certainly, and I think we're going to be taking that issue up in a few minutes here when I talk about the calendar for the remainder of the calendar year. The one bit of business that does need to move forward today is that I'm going to appoint tonight the 2 BET reps to the GEA negotiations, and that appointment first is Mike Mason and Larry Simon will represent the BET for that important set of negotiations. Peter Schur emailed me today. He is the head of the Board of Ed's negotiating team, and I will relay that information to him. I know that I'm anxious to get a kickoff meeting for those negotiations from the town side. Also, I should mention at this time that the biannual BET dinner will be Monday, November 28th. Information to follow as to exact time and place. And that what has become a tradition, the lunch for in recognition of our comptroller and our budget director is scheduled for June. Look, they're already calling to get into the into BET dinner. I bet you that's Nancy Barton making her reservation right now. You know what, then? I'll fight at this point. You know, they say lame duck when you announce you're leaving. They don't even tell you when the lunches are anymore. So,
Just don't miss yours.
yeah, exactly. All right, we'll get back to you on that date. Okay.
Not here this second.
Item 11 now comes before us, old business, there is none. Item 12 now, under new business. Couple of items here tonight. We have the building permit waiver discussion and vote, and for that, let me call on the Budget Committee Chairman, Mike Mason.
At our meeting on Tuesday night, the request came from the Office of the First Selectman to waive the fees on the Visa project building permit fees. The number equals $354,000. Although I don't ever recall the BET taking action on this, we had a by the state. A small permit.
Moved by Mr. Mason. Second by Mr. Simon. So just so we get the minutes right on this, I think the vote is simply, and because of Mr. Mason's comments, or in light of Mr. Mason's comments, that the building permit be waived for the MISA project.
Building permit fee.
Right.
Fee.
Thank you.
But it was supposed to be, we recommend to the first.
It's the town portion.
That the building permit fee be.
Okay.
That's what
Right,
we
that we recommend to the first selectman that the building permit fee be waived for the MISA project.
Did you hear the correction, Mr. Chairman? The town portion.
The town portion of the, thank you.
We would accept the building permit being waived too. That would help the process.
I'm sure it would.
And I think that then with that specific resolution or recommendation, then I think it makes it clear that it's not precedential and it's not a policy of the BET, but a simple case-by-case decision. And I think the BET should look favorably on this for other projects of similar kind. Mr. Finger.
I think it would be instructional for the public who are listening and watching this meeting to understand that some of the reasoning that we did this. The fee would have been paid by the town to the town, but since the project's being bonded, the town would be paying interest on money that it's paying itself. So it just didn't seem to make any sense to have the town pay interest on money that it's paying itself.
Right, and to highlight another point that Mr. Mason made was, this is, a lot of people, I know it was talked about whether it would be reimbursable by the state, and this was an amount that was not reimbursable by the state. So all points well taken.
Do you want a motion on this?
No, we have a motion by Mr. Mason, seconded by Mr. Simon. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? 11-0-0. Okay, so the next item, which is the review and acceptance of the Greenwich Debt and Fund Balance Policy, is a little bit of a misnomer. Tonight, we are not accepting it. in the tradition of important votes coming before us first for a first read and then for a formal vote, this policy is now before us for a first read. I will certainly entertain any comments on a very general or macro basis. What I want to try to avoid tonight is having an in-depth conversation about it tonight to just set us up for another conversation next month. I know the two committees, the Audit Committee and the Budget Committee, have already reviewed this 2 months each. So it's not like, I know this is not new to the majority of the BET members, if not all of them, but I still think that it's important to put this out there in the public domain and see if there's any comment on it, not only internally but externally. So here's what I would like to do. If there are comments tonight, we'll certainly take them. I'd rather stay away from whether they're, if somebody says it should be 51% instead of 49% or something like that, we can discuss that next month and in hope that through dialogue over the next month that we either build consensus or not. But I would like all comments that haven't already been put into these, both the Audit Committee work and the Budget Committee work, that they be submitted to me before May 20th, which gives you another week or so. We've already talked about it for 2 months internally, but this gives another week. That way, what I intend to do is then push out what I consider to be the consensus document. And then what I'd like to do next month is just set it up to where if there are amendments to that document, somebody just makes an amendment, a request for an amendment, gets a second, we'll discuss it, and then the document will be as amended if there are any amendments to it. Mr. Kelly.
When the Audit Committee took this up, the document that was in front of us was this document that was the debt per capita that indicated that if we set the number at 3,200 per capita, we would be able to fund all the capital projects that we foresee at the moment. And that was the number that we used, all right? And that's when Mr. Pellegrino and I agreed on that that was a good thing to do. But now I have this document in front of me, which came from Roland, which talks about the amount of projects that would need to be deferred if we agreed on that cap of 200 million. And it's page 2 of this, well, it says page 2, but it's apparently not page 2, it's page 3. It reads, the top of the page is Town of Greenwich capital budget, amount of projects to be deferred to meet debt policy limits in thousands. Do you have that, Roland?
Yes. This page 2 in the lower right-hand corner. It's right here.
What I just want to go to the second line where it says adjust projects, because I want to make sure we all have the same understanding. That if we set the debt limit at 200 million, are we going to be deferring to some future date about 140 million of capital projects? That would be the second line where it says adjust projects. Is that right?
That's correct.
So how do I reconcile these two documents? Because when I did the vote in audit, we believed that all of the capital projects would be able to be financed with the 3,200 capital limit. I just want to get, so everybody has the same understanding of what we're voting on. I'm in favor of this policy, but I want to make sure that we understand what we're discussing. So that's my question to the Budget Committee or to Roland or anybody.
Mr. Mason.
Let me see if I can clarify that for you. I agree with what you heard, except for one little exception. The $200 million, we went to the bottom, if you remember, on the capital model.
Right.
That page 12 out of the budget book, during that meeting. And in the capital model, you could see those numbers varying. The numbers that are in the model account for the following: commitments that have been made up until this Monday night,
Right.
the anticipated commitment, let me back up. The commitments we made up until this Monday night are prior commitments, and it recognizes the chart that came out of the budget process of what we think are projects that we will do going forward, excluding the numbers in parentheses, which are we called during the budget process, discretionary projects, but none of those are really approved yet. There's always been a clear number that that we constantly have choices. I think consistently through the budget process, we had conversations that choices were to be made, whether it would be MISO or other projects, and I think that's going forward. So that's what that chart represented in there. So the number, if we included everything, the town would have a debt number that would exceed 400 million. If we included everything in the hypothetical 15-year capital model. But I understand exactly how it was presented, and I understand how you see it. And that chart represents being able to do everything that was in the capital model that we've committed to and that we think we anticipate committing to. There's other projects that are discretionary projects. We've had that right from the start.
And, well, I think what we need to do is have a discussion of what we're talking about with respect to those we believe we're going to do and those that are discretionary, so we have an understanding when we make this vote, so we're all on the same page. That's all I care about, is that we agree on what we're doing here, and so that we have the uniform information. That's what I care about.
What I would like to have happen here is the reason I have such a tight time frame on comments right now to the May 20th, because I intend to push out a document. It might be the same document that we have tonight, but I just want to give everyone one last chance, because what I'd like to have happen is, although the two committees have already looked at this, in light of, because we've run it on parallel tracks, I'd like those two committees again to either validate or change what they've done previously. So I'd like this to go back to the audit, I'd like this to go back to the budget. Not necessarily for a vote, but a discussion, because I think it's going to be it has the potential to be a lengthy discussion, and I'd rather have those types of issues vetted. I'd rather have a discussion on the actual document as opposed to, hey, I thought it was this, but it's really that.
Right.
And so, Roland, one of the key points here is, I think, if you look at the current document, what I'd like to see, and you've to some degree done that with these spreadsheets, but also to give concrete examples, because one of the things that concerns me about this document is to make sure that we're actually defining what debt is. And I know that sounds a little crazy, but are we talking general fund debt? Are we talking total debt? And I'm not confident that our document currently is wholly consistent throughout its document that we're talking about just general fund or total. And so we need to make sure those types of what I consider to be more confusing than anything else, not really philosophical conversations, are taken care of. And that's what the hope is, that we can clarify the document so that we know what we're voting on. And then first Mr. Raymer, then Mr. Pellegrino.
Along the same lines as Mr. Kelly's concern, I mean, one of the things that I experienced, I thought, at the audit committee, was that it was my impression at the audit committee that when we were talking about indebtedness, we were not including sewer debt and not including the potential debt that might be incurred with the project Renew and Nathaniel Witherell. As I sat and listened to the conversations at the budget committee, I had the impression that the definition of that had changed some. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what happened at the budget committee, but I thought the definition of debt was, to use the chair's expression just now, was total debt, meaning that it would include the sewer debt. If we in fact do Project Renew, it would also include the indebtedness of Project Renew, even though there's hopefully a revenue source that's servicing that debt. With all that in mind, I think it's very important to do what the chair just reflected in his last sentence of his comments, and that was that perhaps this policy should go back to both of those two committees so we could try and get a little clarity and hopefully get to the point where at least those two committees are submitting something that's very close, because right now I think the committees have produced something that was somewhat different from each other in its basic conceptual footings.
Mr. Pellegrino.
Yeah. Bill, to go to your comment, and Roland, correct me if I'm wrong. It's my understanding that last night, Tuesday, I guess, when we had the budget committee, one of my questions or requests was to have concrete examples of how this budget guideline would impact by looking at the current budget and the next year's budget, et cetera. And I'm assuming that, Roland, what you did is he took what we've actually passed here and then overlaid on it the what it would look like if we have this limitation, with the assumption that what we have here, when you go to the out years, would have shown the $276 million worth of debt, which is exactly what the Budget Overview Committee's memo to the RTM was about, of concern, and that if we have the ceiling of $200 million, then in the process of the upcoming year and succeeding years, we're going to have this discussion in the CIP process of what is our priorities, what projects do we do, on what time basis, in order to meet up to that ceiling. That's what I think Roland has done. I'm assuming that. But please correct me,
The
Roland, if I'm
document that
wrong.
we had, Joe, was this document, right? The per capita one.
We had our discussion off of the budget that we were looking at,
Right.
and that document, yes. And I think what Roland is showing us is, with that ceiling, obviously, projects are going to have to be prioritized and changed or moved out.
Yeah, so that's a discussion we've got.
Sure,
clarify.
but I think
Yeah.
that's where that's coming from.
Right.
So on one hand, let me just make this point. On one hand, there's no magical timing for this, and I don't want to push this through just for the sake of pushing it through. On the other hand, I don't want this to become a situation where either we can talk about it ad nauseum, and at some point it never comes to fruition. So I still think we've set us up for another good hefty set of dialogues in both the audit committee and then the budget committee. I'm optimistic that as a result of that, if there are differences of opinion between those two committees, that's fine. We'll then resolve it at the full BET meeting in June. If for some reason that's not possible because there still is confusion about what exactly it is that we're voting on or how the proper examples are to that, then we will defer it. But my preference is I think that we now are getting closer and closer to that finish line, and we just need to push it across it at some point and understand what it is that we're attempting to do. Sure. If it helps the discussion for next month, then go ahead.
Just succinctly, Bill, I also want to say, after the discussion at the Budget Committee, and we talked about indebtedness, including all indebtedness outstanding, as of this June 30th, 2011, the projection is around 135 million, 136 million, which is going to be about 130 million. So if we have the ceiling of the 200 million, we've got 70 million more to be putting out there going forward. So the real question is, how are you going to prioritize that 70 million, knowing already that some of it is already spoken for, obviously with MISA? Okay.
Okay. So, good luck to the audit and budget committees, and we'll meet you back in June.
It'll be a robust discussion.
I challenge everybody to watch the budget committee was on TV, and that will be one of the best videos on Channel 79. I am sure of that.
Okay. The next item under new business, renewal of the Bloom Shapiro contract for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2011.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Norton.
On behalf of the audit committee, I submit for approval the engagement letter that we have from Bloom Shapiro to perform the audit for fiscal 2011. The audit committee approved this at its April meeting by a vote of 4-0. This is the 5th year of the contract that we have with Bloom Shapiro. The estimated fees for the year based upon this agreement is $133,200, and I so move.
Seconded.
Moved by Mr. Norton, second by Mr. Raymer. Discussion. Mr. Simon.
I'd like to move to modify the agreement on page 9, the third paragraph. It begins, the services covered by this engagement letter are to be performed solely on behalf of the town of Greenwich, Connecticut.
Period. Period.
I was going to say period, but I'll have it. Yes, a period, and to delete the next two sentences.
You get it, Mr. Simon?
So, hold on.
Everything after the,
To only include in the third paragraph the first sentence, and to delete the second two sentences, which require the town to indemnify Bloom Shapiro.
It's been moved by Mr. Simon,
I'll second
the
it.
amendment is
second by Mr. Kelly, to amend
page
the
9.
contract. Thank you, Mr. Norton. Page 9, paragraph 3,
Under fee arrangements.
and to have the third paragraph read, "The services covered by this engagement letter are to be performed solely on behalf of the town of Greenwich, Connecticut." Discussion.
I think it's a good pickup, myself,
Well, I mean, the town has never agreed
to indemnify.
anyway.
I don't think we're allowed to.
No.
The charter will not.
Further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. 11-0-0. Further discussion on the amended contract. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. 11-0-0.
Was this the agreement last week?
Yes, it's been in the agreement every year. In,
You just approve the contracts, so it doesn't have to come back next month.
That's right. As amended.
No, but they have to approve it now.
Yeah, if they don't, my sense is if there's an issue with this, it's going to go to the law department.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Norton.
It's my understanding that the actual contract, this is nothing more than an engagement letter to satisfy the terms of the contract, and that the actual contract does not have any reference to indemnification.
That's correct. The contract that goes,
The contract that goes through the process for insurance requirements and review by the law department, it was totally separate and didn't contain any of that language.
Let me ask you this. Does the contract gets reviewed by the law department, correct?
All contracts, yes.
Does the engagement letter?
No.
Well, I got to tell you, the engagement letter, they're asking us to sign it, correct? Mr. Norton has to sign that letter on behalf of the town, correct? We've just authorized him to do that.
Yes.
Which, you ask the attorneys up here, and I think all of them would at least some of them would probably argue that that's a contract then, or at least part and parcel of that contract. And so I think that whenever we should institutionalize the review of anything that is signed by any member of the VET, including these engagement letters. So if there are others out there, we should make sure that our law department, it's kind of silly that we don't have that type of review and cover, quite frankly. Because while we picked it up, there could be, other provisions that are in there that the town, from a legal standpoint, is looking at.
We didn't pick it up last year.
Right, we didn't pick it up last year, so.
Fifth year.
Okay. The reason for Mr. Vigder's presence is now before us. And for that, I will call upon our clerk, Mr. Pellegrino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I presume you wish that I now proceed with the mill rate,
Please.
and I'm going to move the following resolutions.
We'll
First-
take them up individually.
Yes. The first resolution will be for the general fund tax on assessment list of October 1st, 2010 for fiscal year 2011-2012. Resolved that a tax at the rate of 10.111 mils on the dollar be and the same is hereby levied and laid upon the assessment list of the town of Greenwich last completed as a tax for said town's general fund for the succeeding fiscal year, to wit, for the fiscal year July 1st, 2011 through June 30th, 2012. Further resolved that the chairman and clerk of the Board of Estimate and Taxation shall forthwith file a certificate of the levying and laying of such tax with the town clerk, who shall record such certificate in the town meeting record book and obtain a receipt from the town clerk that this has been done.
It's been moved by Mr. Pellegrino,
Second.
second by Mr. Norton.
Take a little bit.
Discussion.
What's the question?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? 11-0-0. Roland, I just have a technical question. So, and I know the language. I'd also like, hopefully, the HR report is available and ready. One of the key features to that is a review of the risk management. So I'm hopeful that we can get moving on filling that either position or those functions. In October, I look to approve the budget guidelines and also to review the what I call the administrative or seasonal workforce of that study that we hope to engage a consultant on. In November, a report on CityView. We'll get the town administrator back and hopefully have an update on the ZAP project. I'd like to have a discussion in November again on as to when we will do the next revow. Try to get that put into motion. And also, hopefully, by then, we have the report back on the IT study. And then in December, have the review that was brought forward, or the request that was brought forward by Mr. Kelly and Mr. Pellegrino regarding the state of our town's infrastructure and the CIP. And that dovetails nicely with the CIP's work for fiscal year 13, and that would close out this term as to what our major agenda items are. If I've either forgotten a major item, or you think that the timing is off, certainly let me know. You can let me know tonight, but as this, and I'll give this list to Maria, as it's in the minutes, take a look at it, see it in writing, and then let me know if you think that either it's too aggressive in areas or we have some timing issues. Mr. Finger, does that answer your question or concerns about where policies and procedures would be? And is that,
Yes.
does that seem like
The
it's...
only question I have is whether you want to address now or next month when we have the first reading, the process for aggregating various comments that people might have.
We have it now, so I would submit to you that maybe not a deadline or necessarily because our first read is until next month, but I would encourage board members to not wait to read the packet. It's a hefty document that both you and Mr. Pellegrino spent hours on with the finance department. So I would submit to everyone here, please start reading it, and to the extent you have comments, don't wait till you finish the book. As you work through it, if you have comments, get them to Mr. Finger and Mr. Pellegrino so that they can start formulating either responses or let you know why they went a particular direction, and maybe you can do almost like a question and answer if you have, especially if you have repeating questions, so that we're all not recreating the wheel as it goes along.
Mr. Chairman, is there a condensed version that's coming out also, or?
Cliff notes.
We're going to work on Cliff Notes.
Okay.
Did we get this electronically?
You can get it electronically.
Would that be helpful?
Yes, yes.
Peter, would you ask Elaine to also send it out electronically?
Sure, and I would request that if you have any comments, to filter them through Elaine, and she sends them out to Bill and...
Right.
I think that's a good idea. So why don't we...
She's got the database, so it doesn't get garbled.
Why don't we do that? Send it out
Send it
electronically,
out electronically.
and in the email to us, remind us that we should send it back to her.
And the second question is, do you envision as we go through each of the MISA contracts that we just deal with that in our monthly meeting?
At our monthly meeting. No, I think it's a big enough project where depending on what, here's the deal. If one of our major topics, such as HDG, is on our agenda, then we might defer it to the budget committee or something like. But as of right now, I'd like to see that in front of the BET.
I think most of their bids are going out in August. So that, our timing for most of these is either going to be September or October. I think we should just make them aware of our meeting date so that they can do their bid schedules, so they don't miss it by like a day.
We're not going to do our bid schedule to coincide with the meetings. We're going to do that for the project. My job is to
She's there because she did.
let you know. Make sure it gets on the...
She's on the
That's what I do.
Okay. Further comments or questions on just the general outline of the topics? Okay. So, item 13 now comes before us. Is there a motion to approve the public hearing meeting minutes of March 29th?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Mason, second by Ms. Tarkington. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I scratched over.
Abstention. Now before us, a BET budget decision meeting minutes of March 31st, 2011. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Mason. Second by Mr. Simon. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. 11-0-0. The BET regular meeting minutes for April 12th, 2011. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Mason, second by Mr. Raymer. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention. 11-0-0. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you.